Hello everyone, and welcome to a quick little follow-up video from the weathering in Minecraft video that came out a little bit ago. Thanks so much for the really positive feedback on that video. Relative to my channel size, it is what they would call blowing up, so thank you. I'm really pleased that people have liked it. This video is going to be discussing some of the comments that I got on that video, as well as a bit of the behind the scenes, how I came up with the ideas, how I made the video, that kind of stuff. So I guess the first thing to talk about is how did I sort of come up with the original ideas? And it basically came out of being very bored at work one evening. My career is a geotechnical engineer, so I work with the engineering of soils, mainly in embankments and foundations and those kinds of structures. I'd been thinking about ways to make renewable sand and gravel in-game, because they have been a recurring issue in terms of one of the few resources that are, as of yet, unrenewable. And sand in particular is a very important resource for a lot of building materials and crafting recipes. Now, I have seen a lot of other suggestions for how to make sand renewable, and I will be discussing those a little bit later. But needless to say, I had criticisms of those proposals and so wanted to come up with something for myself. When I had come up with those ideas, I started writing a bit of a video script, and I realized that I could do with some help on figuring out some of the finer details, as well as explaining some of the geological concepts. And so I sent an email to Gneiss, who was kind enough to give me some feedback and help me work through some of those explanations, and ultimately ended up contributing to the video, which was amazing. And once we'd figured out the ideas that we were going to go for and present, and how we were going to split up the video, I started building this little Minecraft world, which includes a load of command blocks to mock up some of these mechanics. So I have a little bit of experience with command blocks in my previous life making maps for download. I never had a lot of success with them, but I know the basics. So I put together some command blocks. I will leave I think I might be able to share a structure file of these command blocks. If not, I'll paste a Google document with all of the commands if you want to recreate this. I should say that the commands were only for doing the gravel to sand step and for doing the sand to dirt step. The other thing to bear in mind is, obviously this is not a mod that I wrote, so I wasn't able to add any new blocks to the game. Instead, these are just retextured grey concrete powder and yellow concrete powder, as they have most of the right properties already, and whenever I needed them to do something additional, I cheated it with local command blocks. So yeah. That being said, if you are more accomplished than me with command blocks, data packs, texture packs, and mods, and want to put something together based on these mechanics, I would be really interested to see that. You have my blessing. The only thing I'll say is it would be really cool if you could link back to the original video when you work on that kind of a project. If you are making it public, that would be awesome. Alright, so now we're in the creative world that I used for some of the explanations. This is just a retextured painting behind me so I could do green screen stuff. And I wanted to talk about some of the goals I had when designing these mechanics. So I think the first mechanic was, obviously, I wanted a form of renewable sand and gravel that didn't come from trading or something like that. I obviously wanted to incorporate some real geology into the ideas, and sort of have mechanics inspired by real science, so that there would be that educational aspect. And finally, I wanted it to fit in with what Mojang had sort of established with some of their other block transformation mechanics. So I've sort of set this up here. You can see all of the blocks that moss can transform into moss, and then these are the two blocks that you can transform moss blocks into, either by growing a 2x2 spruce tree or by growing an azalea tree on top. So that's that mechanic. You've got the dirt into the various grass types and paths. You've got the rooted and coarse dirt into regular dirt. You've got the dirt types into mud, mud to clay. you've got all of your different products of lava and water meeting under different conditions, water into ice, netherrack into the 2 different nyliums and back again, concrete powder to concrete blocks, coral drying out, and pumpkins being sheared. There are a couple others that you could probably include in this list that I didn't, but these were this is as much as I could be bothered to do. And the reason I bring all of this up is because I really wanted these mechanics to be as vanilla as possible. I am not a big modded player. I've never really enjoyed any of the mod packs. I have tried for more than a day. It's just not the kind of game I enjoy. I really enjoy the vanilla, how things are very simple, and one of the things that they'd sort of established with these block changing mechanics is that they aren't using any kind of single block machine to do it. There's no sieve or smasher or anything like that. I think Mojang are trying to minimize the number of crafting block type systems in the game, which is kind of interesting, and I think something I agree with. And I think that's why I don't really like some of the proposals that other people have made for producing infinite sand and gravel. So the 2 I know of for producing infinite sand is people have proposed that husks should drop sand as like a mob drop. The issues I have with that is that, well, first of all, it's not very interesting. It's just another mob farm, and we already have quite a lot of resources that are mob farms. It also would require some kind of block placer in order for you to incorporate it into this broader system of block transformation. The other system that I've seen is for dead coral fans to slowly sort of leach out sand blocks into water streams. I think that's the mechanic. I've seen it in Ilmango's Skyblock, like slightly modded Skyblock series he did. And again, that has the same issue that the sand is produced as an item rather than as a block, and therefore you can't link it into these broader block changing systems, which was one of my goals. Similarly, I didn't want to use anvils or pistons because I was trying for something very natural to sort of be inspired by that geological processes. As a couple commenters point out, weathering is, yes, a very, very slow process. It takes many hundreds of years in many cases, depending on the mechanism you're talking about. But obviously, Minecraft is not actually that realistic, hence floating blocks and all kinds of other scientific inaccuracies. What you're looking for is something that is inspired by real science, I think. So, yeah. Alright, so first I want to talk about some of the comments I got to the cobble to gravel conversion using freeze-thaw weathering and moraine. I think mostly people were very positive, but there were some comments about it being a problem for griefing your builds. And I think there's a couple comments I wanted to make in response to that. Firstly, I don't actually think it would be that dangerous to builds. For example, if you were building, say, some tower with a cobblestone foundation, all that would happen is, say this block of ice froze, right? This would turn into moraine. Of course, it's grey concrete powder, so that's not going to work. Hang on, let me do the blue ice, because that's also been retextured, and that won't do weird things. So there we go. You just get that, and the build would remain intact. You wouldn't even probably be able to see the I don't know why it's melting so quickly. You wouldn't be able to see the real change to the texture very much. And then even if that then melted again into gravel, again, your build is not really adversely affected. But I can still understand people want ways to protect their build. The other way you can do that is by keeping a light source nearby so that the block never freezes, so it just needs to be light level 10. The other thing you can do is there are a whole host of different blocks that you can use to waterlog. So you can do glow lichen, and that will similarly stop that block from freezing, and that would protect your build. So I don't think that there is a major concern around this damaging builds. The one part of the mechanic that had quite a lot of discussion in the comments was whether or not Frostwalker should work for this mechanic. And this is to be expected, to be honest, because I was similarly unsure as to whether it should work. And I think my response to all of those comments is, I think that I would be in favor of having Frostwalker not work. Mainly because I think it is a little bit too simple and might be a bigger cause for griefing of builds, because it's so much quicker to freeze and so much quicker to thaw as well. As much as I like giving new value to some maybe underused enchantments, I think that it's also kind of interesting to motivate the players to move about their world and build farms at different locations. People are probably already building ice farms and snow farms and things, so having them also double up as gravel farms is probably not that major a loss. That being said, if you think that the Frostwalker boots should definitely work for this mechanic, I am very inclined to agree with you. As I say, it's a very difficult one to come on one side or the other of. Right, on to the comments about the gravel to sand conversion. I got a lot of comments about this mechanic saying that it sounded a little bit too modded to them, which I think is really interesting, because in my head the wind charge already interacts with blocks, so, and by that I mean like trapdoors and buttons and things, right? The wind charge will activate those. And I think it interacting with another block is not totally unjustified within the vanilla game. A lot of the other comments were based around the fact that the color transition from gravel to sand is very sudden and it didn't look very good. And so there were a lot of comments saying to add some kind of intermediary block between the gravel and the sand, some kind of coarse sand or sandy gravel or something. This would have two benefits in that you would have a nice color change, and it would also mean that you would require 2 wind charges to turn gravel into sand, which would achieve the same effect of the like 50% chance I was suggesting in the video. This could also help as a griefing defense, which was another concern people had. Potentially, if people are throwing wind charges around on gravel paths, they're going to turn some of those paths to sand and it won't look very good and someone's going to have to come back and clean it. Part of me wants to say that this isn't a particularly valid concern, because there's already lots of ways people can grief builds with wind charges. For example, this little wheelbarrow thing can be set to the wrong state by a wind charge. Same with trapdoors and buttons, and that can break redstone. So there are lots of mechanics in the game that are griefable, and I don't think this would be a particularly bad one. That being said, this would be a nice protection against that, because it would take 2 wind charges to turn it to sand, and this intermediary block potentially could be turned back into gravel, either in a crafting grid or maybe with a hoe, in the same way that coarse dirt can be turned into dirt with a hoe. You could maybe hoe on the sandy gravel to turn it back into gravel. The final idea I had in response to some of the comments on the gravel system is potentially a way of preventing griefing would be for the wind charge to need to interact with a falling gravel block. So you'd need to set up some system where the gravel block falls, and while it's airborne, it gets hit by a wind charge. And that way it would be completely immune to any sort of griefing, and it might also reinforce the idea of wind erosion, in that the particles need to be airborne for the attrition process to take place. So yeah. Alrighty, so the next thing to talk about is the quicksand. I think most people were really happy with the idea of quicksand, and scientifically it makes a lot of sense, because quicksand really is just more saturated sand. There were a lot of comments about the actual sinking in mechanics. Most people were saying some variation on you should only sink down if you're moving, rather than the powder snow where you just sink straight in. And I think those are some really good suggestions. Personally, I'd be happy with it working either way, but responding to movement would make it actually quite a unique block in terms of its technical capabilities. So that would be really cool. And the last thing to talk about is the quicksand to dirt conversion. There were quite a lot of comments about this, which is to be expected, to be honest, because this was the mechanic that I came up with last and was the one I was least happy with, but I think it still works. There were quite a lot of comments looking for a different form of organic material to go into the sand to make it dirt. Some people were talking about just bone meal, or lichen, or mushrooms, or slime, or honey, or making some kind of potion of acid, or something like that. I think those are all valid suggestions, but I wanted to try and differentiate this from the way moss blocks spread, because this is not biological erosion, this is chemical erosion. The reason I went for the dripping composter idea was twofold. Firstly, it implies both things about the block conversion that I wanted to be relevant. Firstly, it is organic material going into the block, and it's also the acidic component, so it has both of those two elements. The other thing I really like about it is it makes this transformation kind of the mirror to the way dirt is turned into clay. If you think about this sort of block conversion, you have sand to dirt, where something must be added, right? And then you have dirt to clay, where something is removed. And that kind of flow is really elegant, I think. And those are all of the comments and mechanic suggestions that I got in the video, at least over the last couple of weeks. If you have any more suggestions or comments, please leave them below or on the original, and I'd be very interested to read them. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I may see you in another video soon. Just as a little bonus, at the end of the video I thought I'd show you the creative world and how I'd set this up. So I've done basically a load of cheaty command block stuff to make these all work. So this one, they start off as the grey concrete powder, and then when they fall, they are turned into blue ice with the same texture. This was all set up with command blocks as well, so there's a clock behind the wall that's running a load of different command block setups to basically make each mechanic work with the right timing so that everything looks nice. Oh, hello. There's my poor cow. Put him out of his misery. There's that dropping setup. This was the zombie spawner, and this was where I did the little bucket drop. So yeah, that's kind of everything. Thanks for watching.